Okay, we're going to be starting on page Windows 28 today and looking over the opening the computer window section. We'll start off by looking at a few PowerPoint slides, and then we'll take a look on how it actually looks on the computer. Whenever we talk about the computer window, we're talking about the window that shows the drives that are connected to your computer, and it organizes them primarily into two main groups. The first group is the hard disk drives, and the second is the devices with removable storage. Just as a refresher on there, anytime that we talk about devices, we may call them drives or devices on there, but that is what we're talking about, the physical components, the hardware components to your computer. Now, you may be asking about the removable storage. And removable storage, as you see on here, refers to storage media that you can easily transfer from one computer to another. And that is such things as DVDs, CDs, and flash drives on there. On this next slide, you see that here is a flash drive, and it talks about the components of a flash drive. You've seen many of these. They don't always look like these, but there is just some information about the flash drive. Some of them have a cap to it. There shows the USB connectors as well, and that's the part that goes into the USB port. If you ever wondered what USB stood for, that stands for Universal Serial Bus. That's what the USB actually stands for. When we actually open up the the computer window, one thing you'll probably notice is on there, every drive is going to have a name, and that's really primarily to distinguish it from the other drives on there. And as you see at the example here, we have local disk and then C on there, and that is the drive name that's assigned to it. And that's where you see the drive name consists of a letter of the alphabet followed by a colon, and that's the name of it right there. Local disk is kind of a generic name or a common name or a friendly name on there, and the actual name of it is the C colon, and that shows you, for example, C colon is the drive name that's usually assigned to your primary hard disk drive on there. If you have multiple hard disk drives, usually the C drive on there is the one that's going to hold your operating system. And it says when you refer to this drive, typically you're just going to call it drive C, or a lot of times you're just going to call it the hard disk drive. And this chart here shows you a listing of some most commonly used drive names and their icons. And like I said, these icons are primarily for Windows Vista. They carried those on to Windows 7 on there. It'll look a little bit different on Windows XP. But we notice the first one up here, and this one's actually kind of outdated. Not many computers have these, especially newer computers have these. But this icon right here shows a floppy disk and, of course, a drive. And that would be the floppy disk drive. The friendly name is what we typically call it, or what the computer has before the actual drive name. If we go back this one screen, you notice up where this says local disk C, the local disk would be the friendly name to it. The friendly name to a floppy drive is the 3.5-inch floppy, and the drive name is the A colon, and we typically call that just the drive A. You've seen the example before about the hard disk drive, and you'll notice that the hard disk drive, or typically your C drive, will have the, and especially in Vista, will have this little Windows symbol on here showing that that's where the operating system is at. The friendly name is local disk, and of course your drive is drive C, and that's what it's called. Now your CD drive or DV drive, they look pretty similar, just the main thing that you'll notice is that with the DVD it actually has the little DVD label here. And you'll notice that the friendly name could be depending upon what kind of drive it is. Most of your drives nowadays are going to be CDRW drives on there, but there still may be some CDR drives out there. Same thing with the DVDs. You know, you have your DVD-RWs and your DVD-Rs that are still out there. And then we also still have the CD-ROMs and DVD-ROMs, which, remember, ROM stands for read-only memory. And notice on here it says the drive name is the next available drive letter. You'll probably notice there's not a B on here because typically B was the second floppy drive on there. But after C, that's the next drive letter. For an example, if there's no other hard drives on there, then more than likely it's probably going to be named drive D. And typically most people will not have a CD drive and a DVD drive because DVD drives will play CDs. So it's not common to have both of them on there unless you have an old machine that you updated yourself and just haven't moved the CD drive out of it on there. Most computers nowadays do have the DVD drives. And of course, after that, if you have multiple of those drives, it's whatever the next available letter is, whether it be E, F, G, and it goes pretty much all the way through the alphabet on there. Now, you'll probably notice that down here on the bottom, this is what a flash drive would look like, and you may be saying that don't look like a flash drive. Well, it's ultimately just showing you that this is another drive. That's what the icon would look like. So if I was wanting to go into this flash drive, I would have to double click on this icon and get it in there. The friendly name really varies. Sometimes it could be named after the company that made the flash drive. Sometimes you can name your flash drive, so that's where the friendly name varies depending upon your flash drive. And then the drive name is going to be whatever the next available letter is. So if you do have a floppy disk, that's always going to be typically A. Your hard disk drive, the one that has the operating system on it, Windows on it, is going to be your C, drive C, and then everything else is going to follow D, E, F, G, and so on there. And so you'll see that that is the setup of how that goes as far as the drive names and their icons. This is just a little refresher again about CDRWs and CDRs and CD-ROMs, and same thing with DVDs. You know, if it's rewritable, you can record to it and read from it multiple times. If it's a recordable, you can only record once, and then you can read from it multiple times. And if it's read-only, you cannot record to it. This shows you a little bit about the computer window, and this is a Windows Vista example on here, and shows you that there's the drive icon, the friendly name, and the drive name, and that is typically so that you can identify what each of those drives are. In Windows Vista, they came up with the address bar, so you can actually kind of see the file hierarchy that we talked about during the last video on there, so you can actually see where are you currently at. There's a toolbar that's on here. We're not going to get too much into that this time period because that does change according to the version of program that you're in, but the toolbar does have some most commonly used tools that's on there for mapping network drives and determining up the properties of your drive. Typically there's a navigation pane that's going to be on the left hand side over here, and you can click on those to jump to those areas, and you notice that most of those are those folders that we talked about during the last video on there, such as your documents, pictures, music, and so on with that. Now down on the bottom there's a preview pane that's actually going to show you a little bit about the hard drive, and you'll see here it tells us about the space used, and it kind of gives you, you know, of course if you were using all of your hard drive, this would be all the way filled up. Down here it tells you how much space is free. So in this drive it would have 188 gigabytes free, and the total size of it, and this would be a 232 gigabyte drive. So it kind of gives you some information about how much information you can actually store on your hard drive. The last little slide that we're going to take a look at here, once again, is just another refresher about storage capacity. On there. We went over that during the concepts unit, but notice that we have the term byte here, which is a byte is a single character on there. Of course, the KB is a kilobyte, which is approximately 1,000 bytes on there. And of course, megabyte is 1 million, gigabyte is 1 billion, and terabyte is 1 trillion. And you can see, you know, some examples of how to use those and those terms in there, as well as their abbreviations, and talks a little bit about storage spaces as well. Okay, for right now, let's take a quick look at the computer screen. I'm going to close down PowerPoint here, and let's take a look at the computer screen on what it looks like on there. And this is, of course, Windows 7. Notice that right now I have my OS, which you might be saying, well, you said it was going to be local disk. Well, typically it may be called that, but they named this one the OS for the operating system on there. And then, of course, notice I do have a DVD-RW drive, and of course that's D because that's the next letter. I do have some network drives down here, but and those typically will have letters as well, like this one, drive Z. I'm going to plug into my computer here a flash drive, and you can see that when this appears up on there, that it will assign it the next drive letter name. So typically this is a real-time type screen. It will load up. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than others for the flash drive to load up on there. But it will load up, and you'll notice that it will give you the next drive name that is associated with that on there. And so here I go, I'll plug in the flash drive. It's taking just a second for it to recognize the flash drive, install the drivers, because if you remember when we were talking about drivers in the concepts unit, your hardware has to have a way to communicate with the computer, so that driver is really what is going to allow that communication. Okay, you notice that now my drive E and F has popped up. I put it in a couple different flash drives, and you notice that there's some general information about them on there. I have a 1.86 gigabyte and I have a 955 megabyte flash drive, and you can see the storage space that's on there as well. And notice that it went from C to D, E, and F. To show you the preview pane down here as well, you can take a look at my hard drive here, and notice I have a 148 gigabyte hard drive, and I only have 65.5 gigabytes of space left, so I'm using a little bit over half. You can kind of adjust this on here. If you put your mouse pointer over this on Windows 7, you notice that it has that I've used 56%, so that's a little bit over half on there. Go ahead at this time period and take a look through page Windows 28 again, and on there, and you can explore your My Computer screen or your computer screen. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask or post them up onto the course site's website. And we will see you during the next video where we will be covering creating and saving documents.